All right, today's lesson is going to be over graphing rational numbers. All right, so graphing rational numbers. Sometimes our coordinate plane in our intervals, which are these little tick marks that we have here, those are called intervals. Sometimes our intervals are not in whole numbers like we have been using for a while. Sometimes we have to do intervals of rational numbers. Maybe we want it to be, our plotting to be a little bit more precise, so we're going to use rational numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to identify what intervals I am using for my x-axis and what intervals I will be using for my y-axis, because they can be different. So when I go to decide, I'm going to first look at my point of origin. That is where the x and the y-axis, they intersect. That is 0, 0. So that is always my starting point. Now I'm going to look at from 0, 0 to my first whole number. This is my first whole number right here. That's 1. How many tick marks are there? There's 1, so it's cut into halves. So my intervals for my x are going to be in halves. So that means each line is worth a half. So 1 half, 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves, 5 halves, 6 halves, and so forth. I do that same thought process when I look at my y. So I have 0 and I have 1. What is it divided into? They're divided into halves as well. So therefore, my intervals for my x are in halves. My intervals for my y are in halves as well. Now I graph normally. Once I've identified how I'm going to be, what my intervals are going to be, it's going to make it a whole lot easier for me graphing. So here I want to, we're going to practice identifying the coordinates for A. So we're going to find A. Here's A, and it's at 1 and 2.5. All right. B is way down here and it's at -1. It's -1 and then at -3.5. Perfect. And then I'm going to look at C. And I'm going to graph C. So I'm just going to go to the right 2 and down 1 1/2. And then I always label, sorry, that should be a C. I always label it. So for this particular one, it tells me what I'm going to label it. If it doesn't tell me what I'm going to label it, then I will label it with my ordered pair. So if it didn't tell me what it was going to be named, then I would name it with my ordered pair. So let's look at D, is at -1. So starting at my point of origin, go over to -1, and then +3.5. And I put my letter D. That is when we're graphing rational numbers by intervals of 1/2. All right, let's look at number 2. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify my point of origin, then identify what my intervals are. So here's my whole. That's how I always decide go from my point of origin to my first whole number. Then I'll know what my intervals are going to be in. So it's in 1, 2, 3. So these are going to be in thirds. What about y? Here's my whole. 1, 2, 3. So these will also be in thirds. All right, now the easy part of graphing it. Find out where E is. E is at 1/3 and 1/3, 2/3. Perfect. That's in quadrant 1. And then we have F, which is going to be -1 and -2 and 1/3. Perfect. All right, looking at G, I'm going to do 1/3, so starting at 0, 1/3, and -2, way down here, and I label it. H is -2/3, and 1 1/3. There we go. And so now I have graphed using intervals of 1/2, graphed of intervals of 1/3. All right, let's look here. All right, let's identify what my intervals are going to be here. Here is my point of origin, and here is my first whole number. And it looks like these are cut into 1, 2, 3, 4. So my intervals are going to be 4s. Here, 0 here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. These will also be 1/4. All right, now the easy part of identifying the ordered pair for I, which is going to be 1, 2, 3 fourths. And then down, so it's going to be a negative 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to be -1 because it falls at the -1. J is way over here, so it's going to be -1/4. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 whole. 1, 2, so it's going to be -1 1/2. And I could have written this as -1 2/4 because it did go 1/4, 2/4. Either one would have been sufficient and correct, so that's okay. All right, let's look here. We've got K is at 1, shum, bam, and 3/4. 1, 2, 3/4, and then I label it. And then L is at -1/2, so that's, because remember these are in fourths, so that's 1/4, 2/4, which is 1/2, and then -2, so way down here, and L. All right. So 4. Let's go ahead and identify. So work our magic. Here's my 1 whole, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are going to be in fifths. Same thing for my y-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are in fifths as well. All right. Finding letter M. M's right here. So it's 1/5, 2/5, and that's negative. And then up, so it's going to be 1/5, 2/5, 3/5. Perfect. N is going to be -1, 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, and that is going to be a negative as well. Perfect. O is at 1, boom, and -3/5. 1, 2, 3. Letter O. And P, I know it's hard to see, but P should be 1/5, 1. So 1/5, and then up to 1, and I have labeled it. Sometimes it may be in tenths, sometimes it may be in eighths. You're just going to have to identify first what interval these are in. So these are common ones: halves, thirds, fourths, and fifths. All right, so flipping over to the next side of my notes. So just going to continue with our lesson so that we can make sure these are kind of review. When I look at number 1, it says determine the ordered pair for each point in the table. So we are going to go through and write the ordered pair for each of these. I want you to, at this point, I want you to pause the video, and then I want you to push pause and do A through H, then unpause it to look at the answers. So make sure you pause it now so that you're not seeing the answers right away. It gives you some opportunity to work it out. So I'm going to go ahead and write the answers. Right now, you push pause. -4 1/2, 4 1/2, 4, 2. B is at 3, 3 1/2, comma, -3. D is at 1, 4. F is at 0, -4, and H is at -4, -1 1/2. So you should be now checking your work to to make sure, because you should have already done this, and that is as easy as it goes. Now I know that you could kind of say, well, maybe that's not right at a half, but we're doing kind of an approximate right now because we did notice that our intervals were in 1/2. So that was something that was interesting to know. All right, number 2, we're going to plot the points below on the coordinate plane. Again, I'm going to identify that my intervals are in wholes, and I am going to plot each of these on my coordinate plane just like we did previously. I want you to pause the video, and when you're done, come back and check your work. I'm going to go ahead and work, so go ahead and pause now and do your work. So I is at -2.5, or +2.5, -3, and then -2, 4.5, -4, -5, 0, -2, 3, -1, 3.5, 2.5, 1/2, and 4, 5, and 0. All right, so there is my answers for plotting those points. All right, let's go ahead and look down here at number 3. It says, the graph below shows several figures. Use the information to answer the questions. So A says, which points meet the conditions where x is less than 1 and y is greater than -1/2? So you could go through each point and say yes, no, yes, no. So what I'm going to do, what I think is a lot easier, and this is my suggestion to you, is to go through here and go ahead and write down the coordinates for each of these points. Will make your life a whole lot easier when trying to find out if the points satisfy a particular condition. So this is at 4, 4. F's coordinates are 4, 2, 2, yeah. Sorry, not negative. +2, -4, -4, -4, -4, -4, 2, -4, 4. Oh, and I forgot A. All right, now I can go through here and say which of these satisfies. So I'm going to look at just my x values, which is my first number, and I'm going to say which of these say that my x value is less than 1. 4 is not less than 1. 4 is not less than 1. So none of these are going to work. What about A? -1. -1 is less than 1, so that'll work. -4 is, -4 is, -4. So all of these over here on this side satisfy the x condition. But we have to satisfy both the x and the y. So let's look at our y values. It has to be greater than -1. Is 1 greater than -1? Yes. So A meets that condition. Is 2 greater than -1? It is. But remember, none of these were satisfy the x, so we're going to come over here. Is -4 greater than -1? It is not, so that does not. What about 2? 2 satisfies that condition, and so does D. So those are the only points on that coordinate plane that actually meet those conditions. All right, at approximately which point do the triangle and the circle intersect? So this is just an approximate so that you can be slightly off, slightly different than mine. So intersects means when they cross each other. So these are the 2 points that the triangle and the circle intersect. And the first point, I'm going to estimate it at -1 and 1/2. So -1 and 1/2, and I'm just going to go with the third, because it's not quite at a half, but again, this is just an approximation. Then my other point, I'm going to go with -3.5 and -3. So those are the 2 points. And then my last one says, name the ordered pair that represents the center of the circle. So I'm going to look at my circle. Here is where I cut my center of my circle down. And I notice that it's 1, 2, 3, 4 units long, and we want it in the middle, so it's going to be 1, 2. So this point right here is the center, and that ordered pair is going to be -3, -1. And that concludes our lesson on graphing rational numbers.